Amen. All right, we want to thank the Reverend E. Matthew Falk for leading us in our song. And so we're going to do a quick change on the program. Programs provide for, at 1:30, we will to have the FMBCG reports and summaries. And we don't have everybody in place. And so we're going to move past that and go to the lecturer, which is scheduled for the 2 o'clock hour, and we are upon that. And so Sister Karen M., and that M is for McKinney. I will always remember that part. Holley is going to come and share with us some valuable information. And if you need someone to help you pass something out, we can. All righty. But we are so fortunate to have her with us today. She is an expert in the sense that she knows this information, but she's also done it. And that's where you find the real capacity to teach, to share with others. Not just head knowledge, but it's experiential knowledge. And every church in here has the capacity to do what she's coming to share. So let's give her a hand as she comes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. To Dr. I.E. Mack, who I know you all already know is a powerful preacher, terrific teacher, masterful administrator. That's why you asked him to come and take the helm. Dr. Simmons, to all the officers, all of the delegates here, and I do have to give a nod and a bow to the triumvirate, Sister Bolton, Sister Broughton, and Sister Weems, because that's a lot of the reason that I'm here today. When I was a new preacher's wife, new to the South, new Baptist, they took me in and loved me up, and continued to do that year after year after year. So I just want to publicly say thank you to them. Mrs. Ivory Shepherd was another person who just mentored me along. And I don't see the angel of this house, the pastor. I do want to remind him that when he was 4 years old, he preached a sermon to me one Thanksgiving over some Hot Wheels cars. But I thank you for this opportunity. You should have a little slip. I just want you to take about 2 or 3 minutes and answer the question on that slip. You haven't gotten them over here yet? You ran out? Okay. The person who has the, okay, if you would start the PowerPoint for me, please. You can't get it? Okay, so the question is, if money were not a barrier, what would you do with or for your church, your ministry, your convention, your nonprofit? If money were not a barrier, what would you do? Money's not a barrier. What is it that you would do for your church, for your ministry, for your nonprofit? would you do if money were not a barrier? What would you do for your church or for your ministry? Give what? I mean, what would you do? What would you put in place? Okay, help others in any way that you could. Somebody else? Yes. Do create businesses and jobs. Okay? Start a community development center. And what would you do in that center? What does that mean, community development? Okay, so in an underserved community, he's going to bring together a lot of agencies that can serve that underserved community. Anyone else? Okay, outreach to children and the homeless fully funded. Thank you. Okay, another population, disabled people. Help them to overcome some of the barriers, be able to move forward and be their best. Anyone else? Can you go to the next slide for me, please? The next one. So you were a little slow in answering. And I want to say to you that it's something you should think about. A lot of times we say we want to do things, but then we don't put anything behind that, and we all know this scripture, you have not because you ask not. We have a big God who can build a community development center that's fully funded and that's going to give services to an underserved community, that's going to work with those who are disabled, who often aren't getting services that they need. Going to take some of those homeless people off the street and get them in homes, get jobs, fully functioning in society. And of course, you know my heart is with the children, so and before I forget, I really want to encourage all of you at the National Baptist level to bring your young people, your youth and young adults. The Youth and Young Adult Auxiliary is a separate auxiliary on fire for the Lord. All those people, young people that you brought up, children who are now young adults, young professionals, are still on fire for the Lord, and they are giving back. Every time I am with them, I leave. We keep hearing all this bad news. They are ready, and they're not just sitting back. They have been involved. They're doing some amazing things. Our Congress was out of sight, and so I'm just asking you to look at our Facebook page, and if you're having trouble getting your young people back to church, this will bring them back. Again, a lot going on. Midwinter board meeting, there will be a young adult pop-up just before that in Memphis. They've got a tremendous program planned. So that's just a little plug that has nothing to do with this, but I just want you to know. So again, it is mainly because we don't move out, we don't seek money to do what we need to do. And we put God in a box and keep him small. We think that only large nonprofits are going to get the money. When I work with young people on getting scholarships, I tell them, apply for everything. Teach them how to tweak their little essay for every, and apply for every scholarship, because $100 will buy a book. And if you get 25 $100 scholarships, you're going to have a lot more than if you decide, well, it's not that much, nothing I can do with it. You're going to want something when you're eating ramen noodles and you really want to have a real meal one time, you're going to want that little $100. My daughter didn't apply for scholarships one year. I think that was going into her sophomore year. And so, of course, I paid tuition and room and board. But I decided that since she thought her parents were independently wealthy, that she needed to provide for herself that year. So she got a little job, and the next year she applied for a whole lot of scholarships, and she got some money. You go to the next slide, please. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about some that I've done in the past and are continuing, but I wanted to start with my church, which is Antioch Baptist Church North. My pastor is the Reverend Kenneth Alexander. Most of you knew his father well, the Reverend Cameron Alexander. So we have a nonprofit, Antioch Urban Ministries Incorporated, and we provide a lot of services. We provide services 6 to 7 days a week. It's not just at Thanksgiving, not just Christmas. We have housing for people living with HIV and AIDS. We have housing for people who are in substance abuse recovery, housing for those who are homeless and low income. We provide help with rent, mentoring services for our at-risk youth ages 7 to 17, and social services for seniors 55 plus. Our food our food bank operates Tuesday through Saturday, our clothing bank on Wednesday and on Saturday. And we have seen an uptick. You will go to the next slide, please. So this is what we've provided in September. Now, some of that money comes from our church from tithes and offerings, as it should. And that's where we need to start. Once you start, you're going to find that there are others who are going to want to be in partnership with you, may sponsor you, or provide grants for you. But you have to get started. That's the main thing. Don't keep saying, if I had this money, or if we had this property, or if we had this, if, and just sitting back and not doing anything. Get started. After school tutoring program, got a fellowship hall, got a church vehicle, you can bring them there and work with them, or whenever your young people are there. You have your youth choir practice on Saturday. What about doing some tutoring then? They need it. We keep hearing it, how far behind they are since the pandemic. What are we doing about it? When I came up, I didn't know anybody who couldn't read and do basic math. Because I lived in a large city. I lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Everybody on the block and my aunts knew when the report cards came out. And I had to show my report card all the way up and down the block and report to my aunts. My one aunt did give me a quarter for each A. But it was understood in my household that school was my job. And that's what was expected of me. I wasn't going to get out of pocket because do you know what it's like to have to show your report card to 25 people and have them saying, you got a B? Why'd you get a B? Accountability. But they cared. It was the village that cared. And if there was somebody who couldn't read, somebody in the neighborhood snatched them up. It didn't have to be a teacher. They had that child after school sitting there reading to the child and then having the child read back to them. Going over the multiplication tables. We'd be outside jumping double dutch, and I can remember somebody say, okay, count that by fives. What's happened? What are we doing now? Why did we turn everything over to, I don't even know who we turned it over to. When I moved to Georgia in 1977, DeKalb County had the third best school system in the entire nation. In the entire nation. What happened? So we can't stay within the four walls. We've got to work, and I'm going to talk about an after-school program in a moment. But anyhow, we started the food bank just by asking people in the church to bring non-perishable items. And we were just giving them out. And then Atlanta Community Food Bank heard that's what we were doing, and they came to us and wanted to partner with us. That's been over 30 years ago. So we now have a very, as you see how much food we give out, a very large operation, because they saw what we were doing, and they came and they asked us, and they helped to fund us. HelloFresh meal kits. HelloFresh wants to get those meals out. We get them out to our senior citizens, not just members of the church, members of the community 55 plus, getting HelloFresh meals. Partnership, Good R just brings the bread over. I've never seen so much bread in my life. I work in the food bank on Saturdays, and some of it that gets moldy, we have some land in South Georgia, so we take it, it's mulch. But we don't want to see it go to waste. We want to give it out. And so when we're getting that in, we get food from Publix, we get food from Sprouts, we get food from Kroger, we get food from Whole Foods. They have to get it out of the store. Why not get it out and get it to the people in your neighborhoods who need it? It's not hard to do. All you have to do is ask. Next slide, please. We also have a partnership with Choose Healthy Life, and it does wellness screening. Nothing that we had to pay for. They came to us. We partnered with Morehouse School of Medicine. We've done some community fairs. And again, Choose Healthy Life saw what we were doing. They provide testing for free that if you went to your doctor would cost you upwards of $1,500. I had the testing, had my report, went to my doctor, and she was getting ready to do a test that was going to cost $300. And I said, well, can you look and see? That sounds like something that I just had. Can you look and see? And she looked at that, and she wanted to know, how did you get this? That was going to be $300 for just one test. I had a battery of 12 tests. Again, upwards of $1,500 for free, no strings attached. Now, I know that there are a lot of times, and a lot of pastors particularly say, well, we don't want to get involved with the government. We don't want them in our business. If you pay one employee, the government is already in your business. So you just need to look, even if you don't pay an employee, you're on land that's not being taxed, and they have to keep records of that. They already know. So, and I have same thing, I have that with parents who'll tell me, well, I don't want to fill out this financial aid form because the government's going to be on. The government already knows. Do something wrong, they got everything already. Now, do you have to scrutinize? Do you have to make sure that it's not going to violate your beliefs? Yes. Certainly you're not going to apply for everything out there. And you want to make sure that there are no strings attached. What do I have to do? As you are writing a grant, you have to look and see, if we get this grant, what are our obligations? So some of them, yes, you're going to turn down. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and decide that, well, we're not going to apply for them. That's federal funding. Where does federal funding come from? You. If you've never paid taxes, then no, you haven't given anything. And then we'll be trying to bail you out of jail if they fund the IRS. But it's your money. It's your money. You know, I've been down fussing at them about a pothole that burst my tire. I want them to come pave that road. That's my money, and that's what I told them. You have to use my money the way I need you to use it. That's why I went to vote even on Tuesday when it was just the municipal election. I'm going to go, if it's dog catcher, I'm going to vote. If people aren't doing what you need them to do, we need to vote them out. But stop thinking big brother federal government and start thinking servant federal government that needs to use my money the way it needs to be used. So again, got all of these tests, and they came to us because we were already doing something. And the next slide, please. So some years ago, I was living in Waycross, Georgia, and had several students who failed, and one of the young ladies failed English, and that's what I teach. So I was really upset that a member of our church had failed English. Didn't say anything, didn't ask for any help. When I talked with her about it, her response, and then that of several other young people, was, I'll just go to summer school, there's nothing else to do anyhow. That started a 6-week summer program because we wanted to expose our young people. We wanted them to have something to do in the summer. We opened it to all the churches in Waycross. We started with the young people going into high school, 9th through 12th grades. We partnered with what was then Waycross College. They are continuing the program with South Georgia College, Okefenokee Tech. The colleges will be glad to partner with you. Almost every faculty member needs some service. And so if you come and say, we'd like you to come and work with our young people once a week for 6 weeks, you're going to find people who are willing to do that. I have young people who are almost 50 who still remember the chemistry teacher who taught them how to make Nestle Quick during the summer program. The teachers, the faculty members really enjoyed the program because it gave them an opportunity to do something new, to do some fun things with some young people. And of course the college loved it because and the first year we did it all at church. But the next year when we went back to the college and we were asking, they said, well, why don't you come have your courses, have your program out here and take advantage of what we have? We don't have that many students during the summer. Again, they invited us. We didn't even think about asking them if we could have the program on the campus. So once you get started, you're going to have people who are saying, I want to be a part of that. How can I help you out? What can I do? What can we do? So again, we had faculty members. We were able to use the facilities. We did a lot of different activities. Can you have the next slide, please? The Environmental Protection Agency came down from Atlanta, spent 3 days with us. One of our field trips was to the dump. So we have a lot of young people in that particular era who understood a lot about what was happening across the tracks in our part of town, why they were always putting the landfills there, what was going into the landfills, and they learned a lot even then about what was happening in terms of materials that wouldn't break down, need to recycle. And so everything expanded even beyond what we planned. We had 2 young people who got internships with the Environmental Protection Agency. One young lady continued her career there, and now that I think about it, she's retired. And she was in the summer institute that I had, so I guess I need to retire shortly. But again, we just reached out. We were really just asking the EPA for some materials. And they wanted to know what we were doing, and they volunteered. They sent 3 people down for 3 days to do a workshop with the young people, and then later on, like I said, 2 of them got internships with the EPA. Could we have planned that? No, that's God. But we had to get started. We took our young people on trips. We went to we followed the Underground Railroad, took a 10-day trip, and went up to, stopped in Philadelphia at the Underground Railroad Institute, the Black Wax Museum in Maryland, went up to Boston, and they were so excited to see a group of young black teenagers that we got into places that nobody else could get into. Again, we couldn't have planned it on our tours. We took them to Nova Scotia. We went across to Colorado, and we stayed, in some places we stayed on college campuses. So when they got to Tuskegee and kind of were turning their noses up a little bit, once they found out that the students had built the buildings at Tuskegee, had a whole different perspective. And we had students who went there from that trip. We stayed at the United States Naval Academy. Like I said, doors kept opening up to us that we just couldn't even really plan for, but God could. And as I said, the program is still running, and it's running because the 2 of our young adults who were in the program realized that they needed to provide for their children and the children of the community. Because they kept asking us, and we're like, we can't do those trips anymore. I used to sleep on the floor across the stairwell because the boys were downstairs, the young ladies were upstairs. Can't do that anymore. And we said, you need to do it. And they said, come show us how. And that's what we did, and that's what we need to be doing. The next slide, please. We also ran, as I mentioned, an after-school program. It was open to 50 children in the Ware County school system, and we got a grant. And the first year we applied for the grant, we didn't get it. What do you do when you apply for a grant and you don't get it? Keep trying. Keep trying. I called and I said, can you give us some guidance about, what we didn't do well, what happened, why we didn't get the grant? And the lady said, well, I'm really not supposed to say anything, but got the information, knew how to write it up the next time, what to emphasize, and we got the grant. Ended up doing some very innovative things. We were able to pay teachers from the school system. Of course, we hired black teachers, and the white teachers all were upset. Well, how come we can't do that? How come you didn't? Well, they didn't know to apply. I guess we would have had to hire some if they had, but we knew how to advertise. And our young people came. They did things like learning math by baking biscuits in the kitchen. A lot of you think our young people don't want to know how to cook. They really do. They enjoy it. They enjoy eating wholesome food. They enjoy eating their own food. They didn't realize that that was their math lesson that afternoon. We did a lot of programs. We had them reading books. Took them to the Zora Neale Hurston Festival down in Florida. And people there, again, were so impressed with the fact that they had read a Zora Neale Hurston book, were well-versed in it, and they were asking questions along with college professors because they had been exposed to it. Our young people went to colleges all across the country, got scholarships because they were exposed to all of these different things. They didn't want to come to tutoring. They didn't want to be in school, most of them, so they definitely didn't want to come to tutoring. They didn't want to extend the day and come to school, come after school. But we hired very creative teachers who, yes, they got down and had to do some of the nitty-gritty, but they also made it fun to learn. And so we were able to run that program. That grant stopped. Can you go to the next slide, please? But there's still a lot of grants out. Those are just a couple. It was harder when we started doing this a long time ago. The internet wasn't as robust, couldn't get on and find all of this information. But now you just have to put in information for what you want to do and see if there are any grants, if there are any sponsorships, anything available. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to talk about the grant that we got from Kaiser Permanente Health. It started out with an ad about this big in the back of some random magazine. And those of you who knew my first husband knew he very rarely slept or slept very little. About 3 o'clock in the morning, he's waking me up saying, "You think we should apply for this?" I'm like, well, you know what my motto is. If you don't apply, you can't get it. If you do apply, you might. So let's go ahead and do it. It was a small grant from Kaiser Permanente. We're very concerned about the HIV/AIDS population because at that time, HIV/AIDS, the population was the second largest in the state in Waycross, Georgia, 2 blocks from the church. And so we needed to figure out what we could do, how we might be able to provide some services. And this was just a grant to do some basic health screenings. We had a house across the street from the church, and we just converted that and just did a lot of things like blood pressure checks, but because we were able to get people in for those kinds of things, we were then able to prevent a lot of worse situations because it was in the neighborhood, they were familiar, they were our people, so people were comfortable coming in. As I said, it was second largest HIV/AIDS community because of the route 1 runs through Waycross. And so the drug dealers were not taking the interstate, but they were coming up through the small towns and stopping everywhere along the way. And so most of our HIV positive people came from drugs and from the needles. We had a doctor on referral, nurses on duty, community volunteers, and some legal referrals. Next slide, please. So, my husband always was concerned about the lack of medical care for the unserved and underserved. And he wanted to provide medical care at an affordable cost. And so that was the start. Like I said, the ad was about this big, and that was the start. Brought together a coalition of people, the Ware County Coalition Board, Health Department, and a lot of other stakeholders. And we were able to get a program planning grant from the Department of Health and Human Services. Again, that first grant that we wrote, the first application, we didn't get funded. Went back to find out what we needed to do. we hadn't really talked enough about what we were already doing. So once we really wrote that up with the statistics, with who we were serving, and put in for the grant, we were able to get the grant. Next slide, please. We're still in operation, trying to work in collaboration with all of our communities. Main thing is to be accessible and affordable to everyone. And we keep hearing that. We know that that is a major problem right now. But the McKinney Community Health Center takes people on a sliding fee scale. Next slide, please. That's what it looks like, sliding fee program. People can go on. The next slide. So our first building, which is still in operation, was again in the community. Just provided those basic kinds of things: temperature check, blood pressure, height, weight. But more than that, it was an opportunity to connect with people who knew where the resources were for the people in the community. A lot of times they weren't going to go over to the hospital. They weren't going to go to the doctors because they didn't have insurance. It was, costing a lot. They could come in there, and then by word of mouth, sometimes we had more than we could handle. They say, well, you can go over there every day and get your blood pressure checked. They'll tell you how to get your blood pressure medicine. They'll tell you where to go if you think you got diabetes. And so it became part of the community, well known in the community. Next slide. And then we began, we opened up the senior center. And so it's a senior day center. Notice it's in partnership with the Ware County Commission, Southeast Regional Development Center, Agency on Aging, as part of your Community Development Center, your Aging Services, and the Georgia Department of Human Resources. And so we have a program. I was listening on the way over to NPR, Rose Scott, talking with people who are kind of in that sandwich generation, having to provide services for both their children and their parents. And we're talking about the need for more day facilities because most people have to work. That's what Nelson Green provides. And people want to go there. They enjoy being there. Some of you probably go to Lou Walker Senior Center if you live in this area. It's on that, and people form friendships. They go on trips. They provide services for mild cognitive services for people. But for the most part, the seniors who are there are up and able to move, and again, able to go on just short trips. They may go out to lunch. The one thing I know, every time I go down there, seniors are always cooking, and they have some of the best food. So I try to time my trips down there so I can eat. Next slide, please. I just want to move through. So now there are 8 different sites, all coming out of an ad this big. Folkestone has both medical and dental. Next slide. Go to the next. Kingsland site. Keep going. Alma. Nahunta. The most recent addition has been a partnership with Georgia Legal Services. The attorney who works with that, who's mainly over it, but then there's another, is a Social Security specialist and SSI and Veterans Law Specialist attorney. Do we have need for those services, legal services? It's all free. Partnered with the McKinney Community Health Center, keeping people from losing their homes, losing their Social Security benefits, losing their SSI. I think you've heard in the news about how many of our veterans are homeless. And a lot of that happens because they don't know how to access their services. Or they go someplace and they say, well, you need to see an attorney. Free. Through a partnership with Georgia Legal Services. And then the next slide, please. I just have to brag, that's my granddaughter at the McKinney Community Health Center. She is a senior at North Carolina A&T, and her major is health administration. Haven't convinced her to move to Waycross yet, but I'm still working on it. Next slide. Thank you. So, are there any questions? So when I come back this time next year, everybody's going to be doing what you just said that you really wanted to do for your ministry, your church, your nonprofit. You just need to find somebody who's going to sit down and do it, okay? Yes, and I work right across the hall. My office is right across the hall from our Office of Grants and Scholarships. Georgia State has gotten billions of dollars in grant funding, research funding, but we also have some very tiny little grants, and some people are working with 10 students. The grant process is not as difficult as most people think. You just have to have somebody who is willing to sit down and follow directions. Every grant that I have ever worked on has very specific directions about what you need to include. Today, you've got Grammarly for free, Microsoft Word that checks for free. You've got somebody in your congregation or in your area, if you got somebody who doesn't write that well, but will sit down and write it, who will come back and clean it up for you. It's just a matter of having somebody say, yeah, I'm willing to sit down. It's time. It's time. Yes, you do have to pull together some statistics depending on what the grant is, but again, they tell you specifically what you need, you know? And basically, you just write up what you're doing. And then what do you want to do? So you have to have that vision, and you have to be able to articulate that. Most of the time, they're just looking for you to be able to say, we are tutoring 6 children at our church, but we talked to the teachers at the middle school, and there are 500 who need tutoring. We need to be able to provide that for them. This is how we plan to program it out. This is what we want to do. I'm telling you, you already have them. I promise you. Going back to that first slide, you have not because you ask not. I had never written a grant when we did the first one. You know, yes, I do teach English, but I didn't know how to, those statistics, what do we have to do, what do we need? I learned on the ground running up. I'm telling you again, you have people at your colleges, you have students in business, you have students in marketing, you have people who need that experience. Come on over to the church and help us out. I'm in the Ministers' Wives group, and we're adding a new scholarship, and one of the things is we need to have the scholarship online. And we wanted it to be fillable. I can do it, and I am working with 2 young people, but we went to the college and asked if there was anyone who wanted to do some volunteer work. We're not paying them. We probably will give them a lunch or something to make those forms fillable. The people are all around you, I promise you, if you will ask. And you have, again, whatever grant you're applying for, those people are going to tell you, help you out as well, if you ask. So what do you want to do is where you start. Then just go online, literally go online and plug in grants for, what do you want to do? What do you have in mind to do? Okay, so you've already adopted a school, yes, going in, volunteering, and now you're seeing a need, and you want to do an after-school program. How are you going to structure it? What do you want to do? Do you want to do it in the school? Do you want to do it on the church? Where are you going to do it? You have to think about those things. Get all of that written down. Those 2 sites I just told you, those are grants in Georgia for after-school programs for all over the state. But that's where you start. Just as they say, even though Google's in court right now, Google it. And then look through and see what are the requirements? What do I have to do? Yes. No. Unless you're well versed in ChatGPT. Okay, because ChatGPT, if you don't know what to put in, is going to give you gobbledygook. They're called hallucinations, and they don't make any sense. I don't know how to really make you understand that you already, either yourself or you have somebody who can do this. You really do. And that's part of what stopped us. We think it's such a big deal or we're not going to be able to do it, and so we don't even get started. And you don't find out that it really isn't. Where are you going to hold this program? Can you answer that question? How many do you want to serve? Can you answer that question? Every grant walks you through that. Walmart in every one of your communities likes to be in partnership with churches. It doesn't have to be a really big deal. Do you do a back-to-school giveaway? Walmart will help you out. Book bags, supplies, school supplies. You have to ask. Now, right now, you're a little bit late for the funding cycle because most big businesses, major corporations, start in October to decide where they're going to spend their money. But your local Walmart, develop a relationship with them. How many of you have had something for your youth and you had Chick-fil-A or one of the pizza places supply the food? 3 people? Okay. I don't mean you paid for it. You developed a relationship with that manager who you said, we're trying to help the young people in our community. We want to give them a breakfast on X Saturday for 50 children. Will you supply that breakfast? If you don't ask them, you're never going to get it. If you do, they'll bring you 100. So again, it's not all these big grants. Start smaller. Develop those relationships. Ask for the help. every single company wants to write off something on their taxes. You might as well be you. Any other questions? Dr. Mack will provide you with my information, and I will help read the grant after you've done it. But I can't come and write grants for everybody. But I will volunteer to do that, to at least look at and suggest, well, maybe you need a little bit more here, you need this, you haven't answered this question. Most of the time, it really has to do with the fact that you just didn't pay attention, didn't follow the directions. Thank you.